Right behind me is the largest gathering of people living with cerebral palsy. About 17 million people are living with this condition across the world. Today on Sound Health, we will find out how to manage the condition. I'm Olasumbo Modupe. Welcome to the show.
Seven years ago, David Luth was abandoned at the Pediatric Oncology Department of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital in Diaraba after he was diagnosed of cerebral palsy. For years, he is being cared for at the hospital, hence the reason for his name, David Luth. Okunuga, a caregiver who he knows as his family, has been responsible for his welfare.
I don't even know what to say because they used to call David my husband in the boat. Because whenever it's how, in fact, there is nothing you cannot do in this season. And on behalf of our ward, Pediatric Oncology, we say thank you to you.
I love you so much. My life, hope, everything. I want to say thanks to my husband because he stood by me. He's from the happy. He stood by me. This son is his life. He doesn't do everything. And I say thank you to the family I got married to. Also your family, they really stood by me. Because I know for so many hours that this thing have destroyed. Especially we that have them as their first child. They abandon them, some will just. Some people will be talking to us as if, please, one thing I want to tell the organization, maybe the organization or the club, what they need to do. All these parks, I live in the road. When you get to the park, they look at us as if it's not God that created these children. So it's required things at least to just help us rectify that.
Cerebral palsy is a complex lifelong disability which primarily affects movement, visual, learning, hearing, and speech. Although cerebral palsy is the most common physical disability in childhood, it is widely misunderstood. Through World Cerebral Palsy Day, stakeholders raise awareness in communities and assist others to look beyond the condition. Experts advocate focus on 6 key areas for change for people living with cerebral palsy: public awareness, education, quality of life, civil rights, medical therapy.
It's still Sound Health on Lagos Television, and today our focus is on cerebral palsy, managing the development disorder. Each year, about 17,000 children are diagnosed of the condition. And today on the program, I have no other person than the founder of Benola Cerebral Palsy Initiative. He's no other person than retired Air Vice Marshal Femi Gbadebo, OFR. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Looking at the statistics, every year about 10,000 children are diagnosed, and about 17 million children are living with this condition worldwide. But people still don't know much about this condition. How did we get here?
One is stigma. The other one is lack of understanding. Unfortunately, parents who have gone through this situation in the past and conquered it, if I might say, have shied away from sharing the information with the public. I'm saying this because if I tell you that I know a Nigerian lady who recently celebrated her 50th birthday with cerebral palsy, and she's a lawyer, she's married, she's got 4 lovely kids, young men. And I know a lot of other graduates, some with master's degree in Nigeria, who have cerebral palsy. The question is, where are those parents who were able to send these kids through school, well, let me call them kids, these people through school 30, 40 years ago? And now we have a lot of young parents who don't even know about this condition. So we have a lot of things to blame: religion, tradition, and even our film industry. that continues to portray what you don't understand as being negative. And so we have to address them. We have to build their capacity. We have to find a way to raise a lot more awareness. Even showing these children, letting the world see that indeed they exist. So a lot of, unlike conditions like, I'd say blindness, deafness, or even autism, where we're beginning to see a lot of attention. A child with cerebral palsy deteriorates to a state where sometimes they're not that pleasant to look at. Then because they tend to drool, they tend to have unplanned seizures, and then they tend to have all kinds of body contortions, especially when they're going through about 7, 8 years old. The parents now have a lot of problems managing them in public. And because the public is not receptive. So you'd find children like even my son, who's 21, who is staying upstairs virtually all his life. Not because I wouldn't want to do something else with him, but the technology to move him up and down the stairs without an injury doesn't exist in this country. And the kind of vehicle that could move him conveniently from our home to this place today, it doesn't exist. And if I'm going to use an ambulance, it will cost me an arm and a leg just to move him here today and move him back in the evening. So these are the things that parents with children with cerebral palsy are having to deal with.
Okay, you're a major player in this, let's say, raising the awareness about the condition. At what point did you decide to take up this mission?
Well, for 12 years, my wife virtually managed our son alone as a military officer who was serving in different parts of this country. There were periods in that 12 years when I couldn't even get home for more than like a weekend in 3-4 weeks. And even at the initial stages, we didn't even have GSM. So even communications with them was a problem. So what we now have to do is, as I was retiring, I started to think about it. Did I want to get a job in Abuja that would keep me away from home again? Or did I want to do something else? And the choice was to take a job that would keep me closer to home. Again, it wasn't readily there. And one thing led to another, and it took a doctor friend of mine to say, look, why don't you take up your child's condition? It's a job. Awareness is a job. And you see, when you look at the way most people look at advocacy in Nigeria, it's about fights, confronting the government. We're going to get change and so on. It doesn't augur well for the cause you're fighting. I come from a military background where the understanding is that, you know, people have this misconception that the military is all about war. But you see, at the higher level of command, at the Defense College in Abuja, what you are teaching people is how to manage crisis and how to even prevent a crisis from happening. And so it's more about engaging the people, engaging them intellectually, understanding what the issues are. And that's what I decided to bring into Benola, to say, okay, look, we need to find out why are things not working well. So we spent the best part of 2 years educating ourselves, first of all about cerebral palsy and the issues around it. And why is it that things are happening in the developed world and they're not happening here, as far as care and management and even support to families are concerned. I mean, there's no responsible person in Nigeria that doesn't travel out of this country. So they see what happens there. How is it they come back and they don't put measures in place to practice those things here? And it turned out that, you know, if you have a mindset that is deep buried in us right from the colonial times about a home and a school, then things are not going to change. If you have a mindset that CSR is just about giving leftovers to the needy, things are not going to change. We must let Nigerians as a whole understand that every individual, particularly the person with a disability, is a bona fide citizen and has a rights to everything that they're getting in this country. And also let corporate organizations understand that CSR is not about giving leftover. It's a major part of responsibility, taking care of the less needy in your country. And if we must let those in government and everybody else understand that, you see, a nation is being assessed, the value of a nation in the international market, it's not based on the number of bulletproof cars you have or luxury mansions that exist in your country. It is the quality of life that you give to the less privileged in your country that makes things even, okay? So we decided to work from that level. And that's why Benola's programs have been focused on awareness. Well, it's good to let everybody know there's cerebral palsy, but it's good to let the people that matter know that disability is real, and so on. That's why we say we're out to change the face of cerebral palsy and disability management in this part of the world.
Okay, you're an expert in this field now, and I'm sure you know much about the condition. Apart from spastic form of cerebral palsy, are there other types of cerebral palsy?
One of the things we did after a couple of years is to organize one of our workshops to challenge our medical experts to look into what we call the many faces of cerebral palsy. You see, because people talk about autism having a spectrum. Everything in life has a spectrum. If you line up 10 human beings, you'll see 10 slightly different people. That's a spectrum. If you line up 10 fat people, you see different levels of fat, blindness, the same thing with cerebral palsy. But you see, every family that doesn't go out sees cerebral palsy as their child, and that's about it. And even members of the public who have access to that child think that is all cerebral palsy, yes. So we had to get experts to come out. So there's a paper on our website that's called The Many Faces of Cerebral Palsy. That has gone to show that cerebral palsy can be at the lower part of the body. It can be on left side only. It can be it can be the whole body, including the face. And then it can have different degrees of intensity. So what this means is that if I bring 10 people with CP before you now, you won't see 2 of them that have the same condition, okay? Now, that is very important, because if somebody who has lower limb, what you call diplegia, two parts of 2 limbs, and no serious affect upstairs, they will speak almost as good, if not better, than I'm speaking, and will have some reliable control of their hands. So if they don't stand up, you won't even notice that they have cerebral palsy. And if they start talking about how easy is it to cope with CP, and you look at them, you are getting the wrong answer. It is how easy for somebody like that. There's somebody else who cannot speak, who cannot sit on a chair, who cannot see, who cannot. Look, it's really that crazy. And so by presenting it in its true light, we also help those parents whose conditions are more complex than other people to know that, well, they're just one of the many cases.
Okay. Can this condition be aggravated by other health conditions?
Cerebral palsy is caused primarily by what I'll call mismanagement of the pregnancy. Whatever it is that causes the hormones to go crazy during the process of the formulation of the fetus can lead to some malformation or development of the child's brain. And in the case of cerebral palsy, it affects that part of the brain that controls motor movement and also maybe some level of muscle control. So now then the next stage is during the delivery process. You have some children who are either premature or whatever, and they come out and there's a stressed, prolonged delivery. So the child comes out starved of oxygen, or the umbilical cord wraps around the child's neck. Now, the doctors will always focus on saving the mother, because the mother can always have another child, okay? And sometimes by the time they finish attending to the mother, the child has gone blue, Now, how long has the child been blue? If they can resuscitate the child appears okay. Now, it takes time as the child grows before you begin to see that there's been some element of damage. And the damage again depends on how fragile the child is. Some kids are as solid as rock, okay? And they could cope with some amount of deficiency. And some are just very weak. And then those ones would also suffer. Then when a child that escapes these two options is now mismanaged, either in terms of sickness, like you have yellow fever, meningitis, typhoid, and so on, they can still have damage to the brain. Or in the course of playing, before the child gets to about 4 or 5 years old, the child falls, suffers trauma to the brain, hits the head on the side of a table, falls carelessly, or is even mismanaged by a carer. The child can still suffer cerebral palsy. After age 5, the child has passed certain levels of developmental milestones. Neck is steady, can sit properly, and all that. It's no longer, the same thing could happen, but it now counts as spinal cord injury and not cerebral.
Well, that's the size of today's edition on Sound Health. Hope you've learned a few things about cerebral palsy. For comments and inquiries, please send SMS on 0818-815-3695 or follow us on social media at LTV Social, #Sound Health. A sound health is a sound mind. Make healthy living your choice.